I just remember seeing this young kid like who's about to take over the world in so many ways.
Saw people lined up all the way down the block.
He paid a lot of respect to the dancer community.
Fame came instant. It came all at once.
The courtroom went dead silent. For 2 decades, Chris Brown walked through explosive scandals untouched, an invincible pop titan.
Chris tried to shove her out of the car, open the car door and get her out of the car. She had her seatbelt on, so that didn't work. Then he punched her in the eye. He punched her in the left eye.
But on July 24, 2026, inside London's Southwark Crown Court, the shield finally cracked. Standing in a beige suit and dark brown tie, surrounded by security, the 37-year-old singer uttered one word that stunned the room: guilty. The admission sent shockwaves through the music industry, and now, with a prison sentence locked in his crosshairs, the curtain may finally fall on music's most chaotic empire. A nightclub, a bottle, and a night nobody talked about. Let's rewind to February 19, 2023. The location was Tape, a private members club tucked into London's Mayfair neighborhood, the kind of upscale, low-key venue where celebrities go to unwind without ending up on the front page. On any other night, nothing about that description would raise an eyebrow. But this particular night would eventually pull one of the biggest names in music into a 2.5-year legal saga. Chris Brown was there. So was his longtime vocal coach, Omololu Akinlolu, who performs under the name Hoodie Baby and has worked alongside Brown for years, both on stage and behind the scenes. And in the same crowded room was a music producer named Abraham Dial, known in industry circles as Abe. According to prosecutors, what unfolded that night was not a misunderstanding, a shove, or a scuffle that spiraled out of proportion. Crown Prosecution Service Senior Prosecutor Claire Campbell later described it as a vicious and unprovoked attack, alleging that Brown used a glass bottle as a weapon and struck Dial over the head with it, not once, but twice, inside a nightclub packed with people. Prosecutors also pointed to surveillance footage they say captured the altercation, footage that would go on to shape the entire trajectory of the case. For over 2 years, the world barely heard a word about it. No viral headlines, no paparazzi frenzy, no trending hashtags, just silence. While Chris Brown's career carried on as if Mayfair had never happened. Why did it take so long for any of this to become public? The quiet exit and the arrest that changed everything. Here's where the story gets murkier. Sometime after the alleged nightclub incident, Chris Brown left the United Kingdom. For more than 2 years, he continued his career largely unbothered, touring, releasing music, and living life as though Mayfair had never happened. If there was an active investigation building against him during that time, the public certainly didn't know it. Then, in May of 2025, everything caught up with him. Literally. Brown flew into Manchester to prepare for an upcoming tour stop, and that's when authorities moved in. He was arrested at his hotel, and this time there was no quiet way out of it. He was formally charged, not with one offense, but several: assault, attempted grievous bodily harm, and possession of an offensive weapon, reportedly a tequila bottle. These were not minor accusations. Grievous bodily harm charges in the United Kingdom carry serious weight, reserved for allegations of the most severe kind of physical harm inflicted on another person. Combined with the weapon charge, Brown was staring down the real possibility of years behind bars if convicted at trial. His co-defendant, Akinlolu, was swept into the same charges, facing the same exposure. For a global superstar accustomed to controlling his own narrative, this was different. This wasn't a headline his team could spin away. This was a formal criminal case on foreign soil, with a paper trail stretching back more than 2 years. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. He didn't stay locked up. Brown was released on bail set at £5 million, roughly $6.75 million, one of the more eye-catching bail figures attached to a celebrity case in recent memory. And what did he do with that freedom? He toured Europe, North America, arenas full of fans screaming every lyric, many either unaware of the pending charges, unbothered by them, or simply choosing to separate the artist from the allegations. For over a year, Brown lived in this strange limbo. a man facing potential grievous bodily harm charges on another continent, performing his greatest hits to sold-out crowds who cheered like nothing was wrong. Ticket sales didn't seem to suffer. Set lists didn't change. From the outside, it looked like business as usual for one of the industry's most consistently controversial figures. His co-defendant, Akinlolu, was right there with him throughout this stretch, both men publicly denying the more serious allegations and preparing for what was originally supposed to be a trial in October. Lawyers on both sides were reportedly gearing up for a courtroom battle that would have put the surveillance footage, the witness accounts, and Diao's own testimony on full display for the world to scrutinize. That trial never happened, because on July 24th, everything changed in under 5 minutes. So what actually went down in that courtroom? 5 minutes that rewrote the entire case. Picture the scene. Chris Brown walks into Southwark Crown Court wearing a tan suit, gold-rimmed sunglasses, and a St. Louis Cardinals baseball cap. Security flanks him on every side. Outside, a small cluster of fans wait. Some are playing his music from their phones, one reportedly shouting, "I love you, Chris," while others held up handmade signs. Inside, members of his entourage sit quietly in the public gallery, waiting to see how this would unfold after more than 2 years of legal maneuvering. Then it happens. Brown and Akinlolu both change their pleas. Guilty, but not to assault, not to grievous bodily harm, not to the weapon charge. Guilty to a lesser offense called a fray. Reports describe gasps echoing through the courtroom in that moment. After years of denials, of headlines calling it a vicious attack, of a trial date looming on the calendar, the case ended, not with a dramatic verdict, but with 2 words spoken in under 5 minutes. In exchange for that plea, prosecutors agreed to drop the heavier charges entirely. The assault count, gone. The attempted grievous bodily harm count, gone. The offensive weapon charge, gone. What remains is a single charge, a fray, and Brown walked out of court on bail once again, this time visibly relaxed, smiling and signing autographs for the fans still waiting outside, as if the last 2 years had simply melted away. For his supporters, this looked like a win. Proof that the most damaging allegations against him didn't hold up. For his critics, it looked like something else entirely. A wealthy celebrity negotiating his way down to the smallest possible consequence. But before anyone assumes he simply talked his way out of trouble, it's worth understanding exactly what prosecutors originally alleged and exactly what he did and didn't admit to. What prosecutors say actually happened. Before the plea deal reshaped this case, prosecutors laid out a specific version of events they intended to prove at trial. They alleged that Brown launched an unprovoked attack on Diao with a tequila bottle and that Akinlolu and Brown continued the assault even as Diao attempted to flee the scene. That detail, the allegation that the attack continued after Diao tried to get away, was part of what made the original charges so serious, since UK law treats an escalating or pursued attack differently than a single isolated altercation. It's worth being precise here, because this is where a lot of coverage blurs fact and allegation. The assault, grievous bodily harm, and weapon possession charges were dropped as part of the plea agreement. They were never proven in court, and Brown never admitted to them. What he did admit to is the affray charge, which itself acknowledges that unlawful violence was used or threatened in that nightclub. The most serious specific allegations, including the claim that the attack continued as Diao fled, remain allegations that were not tested at trial and were not part of what either defendant pleaded guilty to. That distinction matters enormously, and it's exactly the kind of nuance that gets lost in a scroll of dramatic headlines. A fray is not a slap on the wrist, and it's certainly not the legal equivalent of a warning. Under UK law, a fray occurs when someone uses or threatens unlawful violence toward another person in a way that would cause a reasonable bystander to fear for their own safety. It's a public order offense, which means the law isn't just concerned with the person directly harmed, it's concerned with the fear and danger created for everyone else in that room. The formal charge accepted by both defendants spells it out in precise legal language, that on February 19, 2023, Chris Brown and Omololu Akinlolu used or threatened unlawful violence toward another person, and that their conduct, taken together, was such that it would cause a person of reasonable firmness present at the scene to fear for his personal safety. Translation? The court isn't punishing a private disagreement between two people who quietly settled their differences. It's punishing conduct that reportedly terrified bystanders in a crowded nightclub, conduct serious enough that prosecutors were originally prepared to pursue assault and grievous bodily harm charges over it. And critically, a fray still carries real consequences. The maximum sentence under UK law is 3 years in prison, not probation, not a fine, and a stern warning. 3 years, the same ceiling that applies regardless of celebrity status, income, or fame. So, does that mean Chris Brown is definitely going to prison? What happens on October 26th? This is the part where the internet got ahead of itself and where accuracy actually matters. Chris Brown has not been sentenced. He pleaded guilty. Those are two very different legal moments, even though a lot of headlines have blurred them together as if the story is already finished. The sentencing hearing is scheduled for October 26, 2026, at the same Southwark Crown Court where he entered his plea. Judge Tony Baumgartner is overseeing the case, and both Brown and Akinlolu will return to face whatever the court decides on that date. Until then, nobody, not Brown, not his legal team, not the prosecution, not the tabloids racing to publish the boldest headline, actually knows what his punishment will be. What we do know is that the maximum penalty on the table is 3 years behind bars. Whether the judge hands down the maximum, a reduced sentence, a suspended sentence, or something else entirely remains completely unknown. Guilty pleas in the UK often, though not always, result in more lenient sentencing than a conviction reached after a full trial, since courts typically weigh factors like the timing of the plea, any expressions of remorse, the defendant's conduct since the offense, and whether the plea spared the court and the victim the burden of a trial. There's also the matter of the judge's own words. At the hearing, it was noted that all options remain open when it comes to sentencing, a phrase that leaves real uncertainty hanging over both defendants. That's not the language of a foregone conclusion. That's a judge signaling that everything from a suspended sentence to actual custody is still genuinely on the table. In other words, the headline writing itself as "Chris Brown goes to prison" doesn't exist yet. Not officially. Not legally. Not until a judge says so in October. So if the sentence isn't decided, why is the internet already treating this like a career death sentence? The backlash nobody predicted. The reaction online was swift, and it was not kind. Reports describe the response to the plea deal as overwhelmingly critical, with much of the anger directed less at the specific nightclub incident and more at what critics call a long pattern of violent allegations trailing Brown throughout his career. Outside the courthouse itself, the scene told its own story. Fans reportedly chanted his nickname, Breezy, as he signed autographs and climbed into a waiting car, a stark contrast to the tone online, where comment sections filled up with people questioning how the same man could keep sidestepping serious consequences year after year, case after case. For years, a significant portion of the public has watched Brown face allegation after allegation while continuing to sell out shows and top charts. This case, for many critics, became a flashpoint, proof in their eyes that consequences for Brown have always arrived late, watered down, or not at all. The fact that the more serious charges disappeared in exchange for a guilty plea to a lesser offense only intensified that frustration, with many drawing comparisons to his history of legal trouble dating back nearly 2 decades, when he pleaded guilty to felony assault against his then-girlfriend and was sentenced to 5 years of probation and community labor rather than prison time. Much of that criticism traces back to incidents that long predate this London case. In 2009, Brown pleaded guilty to felony assault after attacking then-girlfriend Rihanna, receiving probation, community labor, and domestic violence counseling instead of prison time. Over the years that followed, his name repeatedly surfaced in connection with arrests, lawsuits, and allegations involving fights, altercations, and violent behavior, though not every claim resulted in a conviction. To critics, The latest guilty plea doesn't exist in isolation. They see it as another chapter in a pattern that has followed Brown for nearly 2 decades, making this case feel bigger than a single nightclub incident. Others pushed back, framing the plea deal as a standard legal outcome, the same kind of negotiated resolution that happens in courtrooms every single day, regardless of who the defendant is, and pointing out that dropped charges in exchange for a guilty plea is common practice in the UK justice system, not a celebrity-only privilege. Either way, one thing is certain. This case reignited a conversation about Chris Brown that had quieted down in recent years, dragging his name back into headlines and forcing a fresh round of scrutiny over his career, his past, and his pattern of walking away from legal trouble relatively unscathed. But with a global tour reportedly still in motion, what does this mean for his career going forward? Here's what makes this story so unusual. Even as this legal saga played out in the background, Chris Brown's touring schedule reportedly continued largely uninterrupted. He performed across stages in multiple countries while a criminal case sat unresolved thousands of miles away in London. That's not new territory for Brown. His career has weathered legal trouble before and kept moving forward, arena after arena, album after album. His £5 million bail arrangement was specifically structured to allow the tour to proceed, meaning even the court itself effectively cleared the way for him to keep performing while the case worked its way toward a plea and, eventually, sentencing. For a lot of fans, that reality alone has been difficult to reconcile. A man facing serious allegations, still selling out venues, still making headlines for his music as much as his legal troubles. Whether that momentum continues past October depends entirely on what happens at sentencing. A suspended sentence or another non-custodial outcome could mean business as usual, with Brown free to keep performing internationally, provided travel and immigration authorities in various countries don't complicate things further down the line. A custodial sentence, even a short one, could force cancellations, reschedules, and a very different kind of headline than the ones his team has grown accustomed to managing. There's also the reputational math to consider. Even a lenient sentence won't erase the optics of this case. The surveillance footage prosecutors described, the vicious and unprovoked language used by the Crown Prosecution Service, and the fact that 2 of the 3 original charges only disappeared because of a plea deal, not an acquittal. That distinction matters, and it's one longtime critics of Brown's career are unlikely to let fade quietly. So which version of this story are we actually heading toward? Goodbye forever, or just another chapter? The truth is, nobody knows yet, and anyone claiming otherwise is getting ahead of the facts. What we know for certain is this. Chris Brown pleaded guilty to a fray on July 24, 2026, avoiding a trial on far more serious charges of assault, attempted grievous bodily harm, and weapon possession. He remains free on bail. His sentencing is set for October 26, 2026, at Southwark Crown Court. And the maximum penalty he faces on the affray charge alone is 3 years in prison, with the presiding judge himself confirming that all options remain on the table. Everything else, whether this becomes the end of an era or simply another survived scandal in a career built on surviving them, is still unwritten. Brown has spent nearly 2 decades navigating public controversy after public controversy, and each time the industry has found a way to keep the machine running. Whether October 26th breaks that pattern or simply adds another chapter to it is a question that only a judge in London can answer. Mark your calendars for October 26th, because that's the day we finally find out whether goodbye forever is a real possibility or just another headline that doesn't hold up. Whether this becomes the moment that finally changes Chris Brown's career or just another controversy he survives won't be decided by social media. It'll be decided inside that London courtroom on October 26th. Until then, every headline, every prediction, and every debate is just speculation. One thing is certain, though. This case has reopened old conversations that many people thought were long buried, and whatever happens next could shape how Chris Brown's legacy is remembered for years to come. What do you think? Does he avoid prison once again? Or is this finally the case that changes everything? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy deep dives into the biggest celebrity scandals and breaking courtroom drama, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our full breakdown when the sentence is finally handed down.